We were in one of those old county buildings with ceilings too high and wooden benches that creak if you breathe wrong. Like the place has heard 1,000 families break apart and learn to complain about it. Fluorescent lights, cold air. The kind of courtroom that makes your skin feel slightly damp even when you're not sweating. My husband, Victor Caldwell, stood beside his attorney, Tessa Ashford, the kind of woman whose smile looks professionally insured. Her suit fit like it had been sewn onto her body, and her voice had that polished, courtroom-perfect rhythm, like every sentence was meant to land in a history book. Victor didn't look at me once, not when the judge entered, not when our daughter's name was mentioned, not even when he started speaking as if he was reading my obituary out loud. "Your Honor," Victor said, stepping forward, hands spread like he was offering sincerity. "I've carried this marriage for years. Danielle contributes nothing. She doesn't support this family. She's just there, taking up space, a burden, a leech, a leech." The word hit harder than I expected, sharp, humiliating, almost intimate. Because it wasn't just an insult, it was a rewrite, a public erasure of everything I'd done, quietly, faithfully, without applause. Tessa nodded along like a metronome, her eyes flicking to the judge, to the paperwork, to me, like she was already counting what I'd lose. My lawyer, Walter Finch, leaned toward me, older, calm, the kind of man who doesn't raise his voice because he doesn't have to. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Let them build their story." I kept my hands folded on the table, staring at a scratch on the judge's bench, because if I looked at Victor's face too long, I might crack. Not with rage, but with the kind of grief that makes you feel stupid for ever believing in someone. Tessa stepped forward. "Your Honor, my client requests full custody of their daughter, the family home, and 60% of marital assets due to emotional neglect and financial irresponsibility." 60%. Like I'd been sleeping through life for 2 decades. Judge Brennan flipped through the documents, his mustache shifting slightly as he frowned. He adjusted his glasses, squinted, and then I saw it. The moment the math stopped matching their performance. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Caldwell," he said slowly, "are you aware Mrs. Caldwell reported a gross income of approximately $470,000 last fiscal year?" The courtroom went dead silent, and Victor's face, just for a second, looked like a man realizing his script had just been set on fire. "I'm Danielle Caldwell. I'm 48, and for most of my adult life, I've lived by one rule. Keep your head down, do your job well, and love people through actions, not announcements. That rule built my career. I work in tech consulting, systems architecture, enterprise migrations, the kind of invisible work that keeps hospitals from crashing, banks from freezing, and entire companies from losing millions in an afternoon. My days are meetings and deadlines. My nights are emergency calls and quiet victories nobody claps for. The best compliment I ever got at work was, "Things didn't break." That's what I did for my family too. Victor and I met in our early 20s at a community college. We were broke in a way that feels almost romantic when you're young, sharing fries, splitting gas money, laughing at the future like it was guaranteed. Victor was charming back then, warm. He'd tilt his head when I talked, like every sentence mattered. He made me feel chosen. We married fast. Not reckless fast, hopeful fast. Like we were grabbing onto each other before the world could change its mind. Our first apartment had mismatched furniture and a mattress on the floor. We ate pizza sitting on lawn chairs, and I remember thinking, this is what being rich feels like. Not money, but having someone across from you who believes in the same life. Then I landed my first real job in IT, and life began to speed up. At first, it was exciting. New projects, travel, certifications, the feeling of climbing. When our daughter Lily was born, I thought I'd slow down. I promised myself I would. But bills don't slow down. Neither does daycare. Neither does the fear of not being enough. Victor worked too, but my income grew faster. Quietly, steadily. I didn't talk about it much. I didn't want our marriage to feel like a scoreboard. Victor didn't ask. Not really. And I told myself that was fine, because love is an interrogation, right? But that's the lie people like me tell themselves. Over the years, our marriage didn't explode. It thinned. It became small in the corners. Victor would talk about his day, and I'd nod while answering emails. I'd talk about mine, and he'd glance at his phone. We stopped fighting because fighting required energy, and we were both saving energy for everything else. The signs were there. They were always there. The first sign wasn't another person. It was contempt. Little comments. You're always working. You care more about clients than your family. You don't even notice me anymore. And my favorite, because it was always delivered like a joke, must be nice to have your little money. I'd laugh to keep the peace. I'd say, it's not like that. I'd cook dinner at midnight after a launch. I'd show up to Lily's school events still wearing my conference badge. I'd tell myself, effort counts, even if nobody notices. Victor's family noticed, though. Not in a good way. His father had always treated me like an outsider, polite, but measuring, like I was a temporary employee in their family. His mother asked questions that sounded friendly, but weren't. So, are you ever home? Does Lily miss you? Victor must be lonely. And whenever I tried to explain, they'd look at me with that gentle judgment people reserve for women who don't fit the script. The script said I was supposed to be softer, more available, less ambitious. I never thought I was failing as a wife. I thought we were just in a season. Then Victor started changing in ways that felt too sharp to be random. He began taking calls in the other room, turning his phone face down on the counter like it was a reflex. He started dressing better on days he claimed were just errands. And when I asked simple questions, normal questions, he'd react like I'd accused him of something criminal. The defensiveness was immediate, disproportionate. And the worst part? A part of me already knew what that meant, but I didn't look straight at it. Because looking straight at it would mean admitting that the man who once listened to me like I mattered was now building a version of me he could destroy without guilt. And sitting in that courtroom, listening to him call me a leech, I realized the past wasn't a love story anymore. It was evidence. The first time I truly felt something shift wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday. Victor came home later than usual. Not midnight late, just late enough that dinner had gone cold twice. Lily had already gone upstairs to finish homework. He walked in smelling different. Not cologne exactly, something sharper, warmer, expensive. You're late, I said gently, not accusing, just stating a fact. Traffic, he replied, too quickly, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. Traffic doesn't make your cheeks flushed. Traffic doesn't make you smile at your phone before you even take your jacket off. I watched him move around the kitchen like he didn't quite belong there anymore, like he was visiting, like the house had shifted ownership without paperwork. That night, he showered immediately. Another small thing. Another thing I ignored. The changes came quietly after that. He started mentioning Tessa Ashford more often. At first, it was harmless. She's sharp. She knows how to win. She understands strategy. Strategy. That word started appearing in his sentences more than us. He said she was helping him review options, legal options, financial positioning, just in case. Just in case of what? I asked one evening. Just in case things don't improve, he replied, not looking at me. Things. Like our marriage was a faulty appliance. Victor began keeping track of things in ways he never had before. How often I was gone. How much I spent on travel. How many evenings I was checked out. He'd sigh loudly when I opened my laptop. He'd shake his head when I answered a late-night call. You're never really here, he said once. Voice low but deliberate. I'm right here, I answered. No, your body is. That one stayed with me because there was truth in it. I had been exhausted, distracted, running on autopilot. But neglect? Abandonment? No. I paid the mortgage, the insurance, Lily's college account, the car notes, the property taxes, the renovations Victor insisted we do, but I didn't announce it. And silence is dangerous when someone else is narrating your story. His family grew bolder. At a Sunday dinner, his mother placed her hand over his and said loudly, "You deserve someone who makes you feel prioritized." She didn't look at me when she said it. Victor didn't defend me. He didn't even squeeze my hand under the table the way he used to when things felt awkward. He just sat there, and that was when the seed planted itself fully in my chest. He was building something, not reconciliation, a case. The moment everything clicked came unexpectedly. I stopped at a gas station late one night after a deployment call ran long. It was nearly 11. The sky was black and empty. As I pulled in, I noticed a familiar silver sedan parked near the side alley behind a small rental property across the street. I didn't think anything of it until I saw Victor step out of the passenger side, not the driver's side. The passengers. Tessa stepped out from behind the wheel. They were laughing. His hand rested casually at the small of her back. Not dramatic, not urgent, comfortable. Intimate in a way that doesn't require explanation. They didn't see me. I sat in my car, engine running, watching them walk toward the rental property like it was the most normal thing in the world. My heart didn't explode. It didn't even race. It just dropped, like something heavy had finally settled into place. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was structure. And suddenly, all the late nights, all the defensiveness, all the strategic conversations, everything aligned into something clear and cold. He wasn't drifting away. He was repositioning, and I had been too tired to see it. I drove home without confronting him, not because I was weak, but because I needed more than emotion. I needed clarity. And clarity requires patience. By the time he was pretending to sleep, I stood in the doorway and watched him breathe. The man I married, the man who in 2 weeks would stand in court and call me a leech. And in that quiet moment, I understood something chilling. He thought I didn't know. And that was his first mistake. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even wake him up. Instead, I lay down on my side of the bed and stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. It sounded peaceful, innocent. That was the part that hurt the most. The next few days I watched. Victor moved through the house with a strange lightness, like someone who had already stepped into a new life in his head. He hummed in the kitchen. He texted more. He smiled at nothing. And when he looked at me, there was something else there. Calculation. The real explosion didn't happen until a week later. It was early morning. Lily had already left for school. Victor was in the shower. I was at the kitchen table with our shared laptop open, searching for a contract I needed for work. That's when I saw it, an email notification from Tessa. Subject line, revise strategy draft. I don't know what made me click it. Maybe instinct. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the quiet, stubborn part of me that had finally had enough of pretending. The email opened, and the words didn't scream. They were worse than that. They were calm. Once we make her look financially unstable on paper, the judge will have no choice but to shift custody leverage in your favor. My hands went still on the keyboard. I kept reading. We'll emphasize emotional absence. Frame income discrepancies carefully. If necessary, we can adjust reporting timelines to reflect irregularity. Adjust reporting timelines. That wasn't strategy. That was manipulation. There were more emails below it. Victor responding. Agreeing. Discussing ways to portray me as volatile under pressure. Talking about missed school plays. Late night calls. Using my career as a weapon. And then I saw something that made my throat close. Attached files. Tax documents. Modified. One of our joint returns had been altered. Income redistributed. Deductions removed. A signature that looked like mine, but wasn't. I stared at it, feeling something inside me crack. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was trying to erase me. Erase my credibility. Erase my integrity. Erase my role in our own daughter's life. The shower shut off upstairs. Water pipes groaned in the walls. I heard his footsteps. I printed everything. Every email. Every attachment. The printer hummed softly, like it was complicit. By the time Victor walked into the kitchen, towel around his neck, I had the papers stacked neatly in front of me. He froze when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, cautious. I slid the first page across the table. His eyes dropped to it. And for a moment, just a flicker, panic. Then it was gone. "That's private correspondence," he said evenly. "Is it?" I replied. My voice sounded distant, even to me. "You shouldn't have gone through that." "I shouldn't have?" I lifted the second document. "You're forging joint tax returns, Victor." "I didn't forge anything," he snapped. "You don't understand how legal strategy works." "I understand federal fraud." His jaw tightened. "It's not fraud, it's positioning." "Positioning?" I felt something sharp in my chest. "You're trying to paint me as unstable so you can take our daughter." "I'm trying to protect Lily," he shot back. "From what?" "From a mother who's never home." The words landed like a slap. "I built this home," I said quietly. "I paid for it. I funded her education. You weren't present," he interrupted. "You were a provider, not a partner." The cruelty wasn't loud. It was surgical. "You could have talked to me," I whispered. "I did," he said. "You were always too busy." I stared at him, searching for even a trace of remorse. There wasn't any. There was justification. There was certainty. There was the cold confidence of a man who believed he was about to win. "You're really going to stand in court and call me a leech?" I asked. "If that's what the facts support," he replied. "Facts." He was rewriting facts. "You're sleeping with her," I said. Silence. His eyes didn't flinch. "That's irrelevant." It wasn't denial. That hurt more than anything. 22 years, I said softly. He looked away first. "People change." "No," I replied. "They reveal." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I expected rage, tears, something explosive. Instead, I felt clarity, a steady, almost terrifying calm. "You realize this doesn't just end our marriage," I said. "It already ended," he replied flatly. "No," I shook my head slowly. "You're trying to destroy me." He didn't answer, and that silence was confirmation. He thought I was naive. He thought I was distracted. He thought I would crumble. Instead, I gathered the papers, slid them into a folder, and stood up. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "To get clarity." He laughed softly. "You think you can outmaneuver Tessa?" I looked at him for a long moment. "I don't need to outmaneuver anyone," I said. "I just need the truth." And as I walked out of that kitchen, something inside me shifted from heartbreak to resolve. Not revenge, not hatred, but purpose. If they wanted to play with numbers, I would bring light. If they wanted to rewrite my life, I would document every line. And when we walked back into that courtroom, they wouldn't be arguing against emotion. They would be arguing against evidence. And evidence doesn't get tired. I didn't drive home right away after leaving the house that morning. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a small accounting office across town, the folder of printed emails resting on the passenger seat like something radioactive. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I always thought betrayal would feel explosive, like shattered glass or screaming or some cinematic breakdown in a grocery store aisle. Instead, it felt like exhaustion, a deep, bone-level fatigue. 22 years reduced to strategy memos. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same face, same woman, but I looked older, not in years, in realization. The first question that surfaced wasn't, how could he? It was worse. What did I miss? I replayed the last 5 years like security footage. The missed dinners, the late calls, the time I fell asleep during a movie he'd been excited to watch. The school play I joined halfway through because of a client emergency. Had I created the space he stepped into? Had I made it easy for him to believe I didn't care? The guilt came quickly. It always does when you're the responsible one. You start auditing yourself before anyone else does. But guilt is dangerous when someone else is committing deliberate harm. I walked into the accounting office and asked for Raymond Harper. We weren't close friends, but we'd crossed paths professionally. He was steady, quiet, the kind of man who speaks only when he's sure. He looked up when I entered his office. "Danielle, you look tense." "That's polite," I replied, setting the folder down. He opened it without commentary. I watched him read. He didn't rush, didn't react, just turned pages. Finally, he removed his glasses and looked at me directly. "This isn't sloppy," he said. I swallowed. "What is it?" "It's intentional." The words settled heavily between us. "They shifted income reporting across quarters," he continued. "Omitted documentation, modified a joint signature. If you didn't authorize this, someone did it for you." "For me?" I echoed bitterly. "With your name attached." I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. "This is fraud, isn't it?" Raymond didn't dramatize it. "Yes." Not a whisper. Not a maybe. A yes. My throat tightened, not with fear, but with a strange sense of grounding. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining malice where there was none. They had crossed a line. "Do you want to pursue this legally?" Raymond asked. I hesitated. That was the moment I faced myself. Was I about to destroy the father of my child? Expose him publicly? Trigger investigations that could follow him for years? The answer came slowly. "I don't want to destroy anyone," I said carefully. "I want the truth documented." Raymond nodded. "Then document everything." When I stepped back into the parking lot, the wind hit my face sharply. It felt clarifying. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was grieving. Grieving the version of Victor I thought I married. Grieving the illusion that quiet sacrifice would always be understood. That night, Lily knocked softly on my office door. "Mom?" I quickly closed the folder. "Yeah, sweetheart." She stepped in, hugging a pillow to her chest. "Are you and Dad going to be okay?" Children ask questions like they're asking about the weather, but the weight behind them is unbearable. "We're going to be honest," I said gently. "That's not what I asked." I exhaled slowly. "I don't know yet." She studied my face carefully, like she was searching for cracks. "Dad says you're trying to punish him." The words didn't sting the way Leech had. They hurt differently, more quietly. "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I told her. "I'm trying to protect what's true." She frowned slightly. "Did you do something wrong?" That question almost broke me. "No," I said firmly. "I worked too much sometimes. I was tired, but I didn't lie, and I didn't cheat." Her eyes flickered. She didn't say the word, but she knew. Children always know. She nodded slowly. "I just don't want to lose you." "You won't," I whispered. After she left, I sat alone in the dim light of my desk lamp. The house felt different. Not emptier, clearer. Victor was no longer pretending warmth. The distance between us was official now, structural. And in that quiet space, I made a decision. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't perform heartbreak in court. I would prepare. If Victor wanted to narrate me as absent and unstable, I would counter with facts and timelines. If he wanted custody leverage, I would present financial transparency. If he wanted to accuse me of leeching, I would let numbers speak, not because I needed revenge, but because my daughter deserved a record that reflected reality. And I deserved to walk out of that courtroom knowing I didn't shrink when someone tried to erase me. The calm inside me wasn't softness. It was structure, and structure doesn't crumble easily. The next 2 weeks felt like living inside a slow-moving storm. Nothing dramatic happened in public, but underneath everything, pressure was building. Victor moved into the guest room. We coordinated Lily's schedule through short, logistical sentences. Parent-teacher meeting is Thursday. She has a dentist appointment at 4. No warmth, no fight, just procedural detachment. But outside the house, the narrative was shifting, and not in my favor. Victor's mother called one afternoon. Her voice was calm, almost sympathetic. "Danielle, I just want you to know, Victor is devastated." I almost laughed. "Devastated?" I asked evenly. "He feels abandoned. He says you chose your career over your family." There it was again. Chosen. As if providing was indulgence. "I built stability," I replied. "That's not abandonment." Silence. Then the softest blade. "Well, money isn't everything." The irony was almost poetic. I hung up before my voice betrayed me. At work, the escalation came differently. A colleague pulled me aside. "Hey, is everything okay at home?" "Why?" Victor reached out to someone in leadership. He mentioned you've been unstable lately. Said we should monitor project reliability. For a second, I couldn't breathe. He wasn't just attacking my role as a mother. He was circling my career. That was when I realized this wasn't emotional desperation. It was strategy. Tessa had coached him well. Undermine her stability. Create doubt in professional circles. Shift leverage. But here's the thing about being underestimated for years. You learn to move quietly. I didn't confront him about work interference. Instead, I documented it. Every email. Every forwarded message. Every conversation, timestamp. At night, after Lily went to bed, I sat at my desk building a binder. Tabs. Chronology. Email threads between Victor and Tessa. Tax discrepancies. GPS records from shared cloud storage showing late-night meetings at that rental property. Screenshots. Backup copies. I wasn't creating chaos. I was creating clarity, Victor noticed. One evening, he stood in the doorway while I organized documents. "You think this makes you look sane?" he asked. "It makes me look prepared." He crossed his arms. "You're turning this into a war." "No," I said calmly. "You did that when you forged federal documents." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand legal maneuvering, and you don't understand consequences." He stepped closer. "You really want to go nuclear? For what? Pride?" "For truth," I replied. He laughed softly. "You always were dramatic and private." That was almost funny, because I was the opposite of dramatic. He just wasn't used to me pushing back. The next escalation came through Lily. She started coming home tense, quieter. One night, while clearing dishes, she finally said it. "Dad said if the judge sees how much you're gone, he might give him full custody." My chest tightened. "Did he now?" She nodded slowly. "He says courts don't like workaholic moms." There it was. The seed planted carefully. Doubt. Fear. Divide the child emotionally before the ruling. I crouched in front of her, lowering my voice. "Lily, listen to me. Courts look at facts. They look at stability. They look at love. And none of those disappear because someone works." She studied my face. "You're not going anywhere?" "No." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. That night, I cried. Not loudly. Just quietly. In the shower where the water could swallow the sound. Not because I was losing, but because the man I once loved was using our daughter as leverage. That changed something inside me. The escalation hit its peak 3 days before the second hearing. Victor cornered me in the kitchen. "Tessa says if you withdraw the fraud allegation, we can settle cleanly." "Withdraw?" I repeated. "Yes. You don't need to involve external agencies. We can keep this civil." Civil. He wanted me silent. "If the documents are legitimate," I said slowly, "you shouldn't be worried." He exhaled sharply. "You're being vindictive." "No," I corrected. "I'm being precise." He leaned. "You'll ruin me." I looked at him for a long moment. "You started that." Not guilt. Fear. And that fear told me everything. He'd expected shame. Expected me to fold under the weight of being labeled absent. Expected me to panic at the word leech. And silence. "The night, are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," I admitted. That surprised her. "You are?" "I'm scared of losing trust," I said. "Not of losing money." She crawled into bed beside me like she used to when she was little. "Dad seems different," she whispered. "I know." She hesitated. "Mom, if he lied, why?" I thought about that carefully. Sometimes when people feel small, they try to make someone else smaller. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "You don't look small." That was the first time in weeks I felt warmth instead of tension. The escalation had done something unexpected. It had stripped away illusion. Victor wasn't powerful. He was scrambling. Tessa wasn't brilliant. She was reckless. And I wasn't a leech. I was a woman who had built a life quietly and was now being forced to defend it loudly. When I snapped the binder closed that night, I didn't feel rage. I felt inevitability. They thought the income reveal 2 weeks ago was the surprise. They had no idea what came next. And the truth? It doesn't panic. It waits. The night before the second hearing, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not because Victor was there, but because the air felt heavy with something unfinished. Lily was asleep. Victor was in the guest room. The hallway light hummed faintly. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the binder closed in front of me. For the first time since this started, the weight of it all pressed down without distraction. I wasn't thinking about strategy. I wasn't thinking about court. I was thinking about 22 years. 22 years of shared grocery lists, shared holidays, shared grief when my father passed. The night Lily was born, Victor crying harder than I was. The first house we bought. The oak tree in the yard we planted together. How does something that once felt sacred become tactical? That was the moment the grief hit fully. Not sharp, not explosive, just suffocating. I walked down the hallway and stopped at the wall of framed photos. Christmas mornings, beach trips, Lily's middle school graduation. In every picture, we were smiling. And I realized something brutal. Photographs don't capture context. They don't show the argument in the car beforehand. They don't show the silence afterward. They just preserve a second. And for years, I mistook seconds for stability. I leaned my forehead against the wall and closed my eyes. Maybe I should have fought harder earlier. Maybe I should have demanded therapy. Maybe I should have chosen fewer projects. Maybe I should have come home louder. Maybe love needed more volume. The doubts crept in like fog. What if the judge believed him? What if working long hours did look neglectful? What if my calm demeanor in court came off as cold? What if Lily, years from now, believed his version? The thought made my stomach turn. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about assets. It was about narrative. Who gets remembered as the stable parent? Who gets labeled absent? And in the quiet of that kitchen, I felt very, very alone. Because even though I had evidence, even though I had facts, the emotional truth of losing a marriage can't be documented in tabs and folders. Around midnight, I heard movement behind me. Victor. He stood in the doorway, not defensive for once, just tired. "You really want to do this tomorrow?" he asked quietly. I didn't turn around. "It's already happening. We could still settle by pretending fraud didn't happen." He sighed. "You don't have to destroy everything." I finally faced him. "You already did." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering. "You were never here." "I was building." "For who?" he shot back. "For us," I whispered. Silence. Not angry, just final. "I didn't feel chosen," he said, after a long pause. The honesty in that sentence stunned me. "You were," I replied. "Every day. I just didn't perform it." He shook his head slowly. "It didn't feel like that." And that was the tragedy. Not betrayal. Misalignment. He needed affirmation. I gave security. He needed attention. I gave stability. He interpreted quiet as indifference. I interpreted quiet as trust. Somewhere along the way, we stopped translating each other. But that doesn't excuse fraud. It doesn't excuse manipulation. It doesn't excuse attempting to dismantle someone's reputation. "I didn't cheat because you worked too much," he said softly. There it was. The admission. I cheated because I felt invisible. I absorbed that. Painfully. I never tried to make you invisible. I know. That was worse. Because it meant he knew the difference. He just chose something else anyway. For a brief moment, I wanted to collapse into old patterns, to apologize, to compromise, to say, let's fix this. But some damage isn't repairable because it wasn't accidental. It was strategic. "I won't attack you," I said finally, "but I won't protect you from consequences either." He looked at me like he wanted to argue, then like he wanted to say something kinder. Then he just nodded and walked away. The house went quiet again. I stood there, breathing slowly. This was the lowest point. Not because I was losing, but because I fully understood he wasn't a monster. He was a man who made selfish, calculated decisions when he felt small. And I was a woman who confused endurance with intimacy. The marriage was over long before the courtroom. Tomorrow was just documentation. I turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs. Not to win, not to punish, but to close something with integrity. And when I lay down in bed, I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, whatever happens tomorrow, I will not shrink. 2 weeks earlier, the courtroom had gone silent when the judge read my income out loud. This time, the silence felt different. It felt expectant. I walked into the county courthouse with the binder tucked under my arm. Not like a weapon, more like a ledger, a record of what had happened. Victor was already seated beside Tessa. He looked less polished today, his tie slightly crooked, his confidence dimmed, not gone, but thinner. Tessa didn't smile at me this time. Judge Brennan entered, robe swaying slightly as he sat. Let's proceed. Tessa stood first, but her voice wasn't as smooth as before. Your Honor, we maintain that Mrs. Caldwell's career instability. Instability, the judge interrupted calmly. Mrs. Caldwell's income appears quite stable. Tessa cleared her throat. Emotional instability. There it was. I didn't flinch. Walter rose beside me. Your Honor, the respondent would like to submit additional evidence. The judge nodded. I stood and handed the binder forward. The sound of the metal rings opening echoed faintly. Walter spoke steadily. Exhibit A. Email correspondence between Mr. Caldwell and his attorney discussing strategic portrayal of my client as financially negligent. Victor shifted in his seat. Tessa's jaw tightened. Exhibit B. Altered tax filings with discrepancies in reported income and unauthorized signature modifications. The judge's expression hardened. Exhibit C. Email instructions regarding custodial leverage based on manufactured financial irregularities. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear someone in the back clear their throat. Tessa stood abruptly. Your Honor, these communications are privileged. Walter didn't raise his voice. They were accessed on a shared marital device relevant to financial representation submitted to this court. Judge Brennan leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, he said slowly, did you authorize alterations to joint tax documents? Victor opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Tessa, then back at the judge. I relied on counsel, he said carefully. The judge turned to Tessa. Ms. Ashford, did you assist in modifying these documents? Her composure cracked just slightly. I advised on positioning. Did you modify federal filings? Silence. That silence said everything. The judge removed his glasses and placed them on the bench. Attempting to misrepresent financial records in this court is not positioning. It is misconduct. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Victor looked at me for the first time that morning, not with anger, with realization. The turning point wasn't explosive. It was procedural. Judge Brennan continued. I am referring this matter to the State Bar Association for review. Additionally, discrepancies in federal documentation may require further investigation. Tessa's face drained of color. Victor's shoulders dropped. The script had collapsed. Walter continued calmly. Your Honor, in light of these findings, we request custody remain shared and financial assets divided equitably according to verified income. The judge nodded. Mrs. Caldwell's income and employment history demonstrate stability, not negligence. That word, stability, felt like oxygen. The judge ruled quickly. No disproportionate asset division. No primary custody shift. No punitive financial penalty. Each ruling landed like a steady hammer, not dramatic, just fair. Victor didn't argue. Tessa didn't speak again. When the gavel struck, it wasn't thunder. It was finality. As people began to stand, Victor stepped toward me. Danielle. I paused, but didn't move closer. You didn't have to take it this far, he said quietly. I didn't, I replied. You did. He looked like he wanted to say something else. Apology. Defense. Justification. Instead, he said nothing, and that silence felt different from before. It wasn't strategy. It was consequence. I walked out of the courtroom not victorious, but anchored. The turning point wasn't about exposing him. It was about reclaiming the narrative. He tried to make me look unstable. The court documented stability. He tried to make me look absent. The record reflected contribution. He tried to rewrite my character. The truth held. Outside, the autumn air felt crisp. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders weren't tight. Not because everything was fixed, but because clarity had replaced uncertainty. And clarity is power. Life didn't explode after the hearing. It deflated. Victor moved out within a week. No dramatic fight, no shouting in the driveway, just cardboard boxes and quiet footsteps. He packed efficiently, avoiding eye contact, taking frame photos off the wall like they were office decor being reassigned. "I'll pick Lily up Friday," he said flatly, carrying the last box toward his car. I nodded. No speeches, no tears. Some endings don't roar. They exhale. Word traveled fast about Tessa. Within days, her firm released a carefully worded statement about conduct inconsistent with professional standards. Her face disappeared from the firm's website. Her social media went silent. The local legal community doesn't need sirens to understand scandal. Silence does the work. Victor tried to keep his composure, but reputation erosion is quiet and persistent. A mutual acquaintance told me he'd been asked to step down from a volunteer board position until things settled. Another said clients were hesitant to work with him during personal litigation concerns. Consequences rarely arrive with drama. They arrive with distance. Victor texted me one evening. "You didn't have to involve external review." I stared at the message, then typed back, "I didn't involve anything. The evidence did." No response. At home, the atmosphere shifted gradually. The house felt larger, not lonelier, just less tense. I worked fewer late nights, took fewer travel-heavy contracts, ate dinner at the table instead of over a keyboard. Lily noticed. One night, as we were cleaning up dishes, she said quietly, "It's calmer here." That word meant more than any courtroom ruling. Calmer. She had felt it too. The tension, the undercurrent. Children always do. Her time split evenly between us. The first few exchanges were awkward. Parking lot handoffs, short sentences, polite restraint. Victor tried to remain upbeat with her. But Lily is perceptive. One Sunday night, she came home from his apartment and sat at the kitchen counter without speaking. "Everything okay?" I asked. She shrugged. "Dad seems stressed." I didn't probe. "He says people are treating him differently." I kept my voice neutral. "How does that make you feel?" She thought about it. "Confused. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied gently. "You're not responsible for adult consequences." She nodded slowly. Then, after a pause, she added, "He said you wanted to win." I let that settle. "Did it look like I was celebrating?" She shook her head. "No, you just stood there." That's because this was never about winning. It was about correction. Victor attempted reconciliation once, not of the marriage, of the narrative. He asked to meet for coffee. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, the smell of espresso thick in the air. "You could have handled it privately," he said. "I tried." "You escalated it. I documented it." He leaned back, frustrated. "You didn't fight for us." That one almost made me smile. "I worked for us," I said calmly. "You fought me." Silence stretched between us. "I didn't think you'd push back like that," he admitted. There it was. The truth behind everything. "Underestimation. You thought I'd be ashamed," I replied. He didn't deny it. "I thought you'd want to avoid conflict." "I do," I said, "but not at the cost of my integrity." He looked smaller than he used to. Not physically, emotionally. Not because I crushed him. Because the illusion that he could rewrite me had collapsed. Tessa's review moved forward quietly. I didn't follow every detail. I didn't need to. The referral itself was enough. Victor's circle shrank. Not dramatically. Gradually. Fewer invitations. More distance. People don't like proximity to ethical fog. And through it all, I didn't gloat. I didn't retaliate. I didn't speak poorly about him to Lily, because revenge is loud. Justice is quiet. One evening, months later, I stood on the porch watching the wind move through the oak tree we planted together years ago. Leaves rustled softly. The house felt steady, not triumphant, just balanced. Victor had wanted to shift power. Instead, he exposed imbalance. And imbalance corrects itself eventually. The fallout didn't destroy him. It recalibrated him. And it clarified me. It's been almost a year now. The house feels different. Not because it's missing someone, but because it's no longer holding its breath. Lily is older in ways that have nothing to do with age. She asks sharper questions. She watches more closely. And sometimes when we sit at the kitchen table doing nothing in particular, she'll say, "I'm glad you didn't yell." I always smile at that because she thought yelling was strength. So did I, once. Victor and I coexist now. School events, short updates, civil exchanges. There's no warmth, but there's no war either. Tessa's case concluded quietly. Professional discipline, reputation altered, a career rerouted. Victor rebuilt, slowly. Smaller circles, fewer assumptions. I don't hate him. I don't even resent him. What we had wasn't destroyed by the courtroom. It was exposed there. And exposure, painful as it is sometimes mercy. The biggest shift didn't happen in front of a judge. It happened inside me. I stopped confusing silence with love. I stopped believing that quiet sacrifice automatically translates into appreciation. I stopped thinking that stability speaks for itself. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you have to let it speak out loud. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need rage to defend yourself. You don't need to humiliate someone to stand tall. And you don't need revenge to feel whole again. You need clarity. You need documentation of facts, of character, of who you truly are when no one is rewriting you. Victor tried to make me small, tried to make me unstable, tried to make me invisible. But the truth didn't shout. It stood. And when it was finally given the room to breathe, it did what truth always does. It corrected the story. And sometimes that's enough.